A pediatric nurse discovered strange marks on a 7-year-old boy's legs during a vaccination when she distracted the stepmother and showed the photos to the doctor. His reaction made her call 911 at once. The fluorescent lights of Millbrook Community Hospital hummed quietly overhead as Harper Fletcher organized the vaccination tray with practiced precision. Through the small window of the examination room, she could see the gray October sky hanging low over the Maine coastline, promising rain by afternoon. A perfect day to be inside, she thought, securing the last of the syringes in their designated slots. Her watch showed 2:15 p.m. The Winters appointment was scheduled for 2 o'clock, but tardiness wasn't unusual for parents juggling work and children's schedules. Harper used the extra moments to review the file once more. Toby Winters, age 7, due for his annual flu shot and overdue for a routine checkup. His last visit had been almost 10 months ago, for strep throat. Not with her, but with Dr. Patel in the West Wing. A soft knock at the door pulled her attention away from the file. Nurse Jenna Parker poked her head in. "Your 2 o'clock is here. They're saying traffic was bad because of construction on Main." "No problem. Send them in whenever they're ready," Harper replied with a smile that creased the corners of her eyes. At 42, Harper had spent the last 15 years in pediatric care, and there wasn't much she hadn't seen. The laugh lines around her eyes were earned from the joy her young patients brought her, while the furrow that occasionally appeared between her brows came from the harder aspects of her job: the crying infants with ear infections, the teenagers hiding self-harm, and the rare but devastating cases that kept her awake at night. The door opened wider, revealing a small boy with tousled brown hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. He wore jeans despite the cool weather, and a long-sleeved navy blue shirt that appeared a size too large. Behind him stood a woman in her early 30s with immaculate blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, wearing a beige cashmere sweater and dark slacks that spoke of money and careful attention to appearance. "Hello there, you must be Toby," Harper said, crouching slightly to meet the boy's eye level. "I'm Nurse Fletcher, but you can call me Harper if you'd like." Toby gave a small nod but remained silent, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his oversized shirt. "I'm Vanessa Winters, Toby's stepmother," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. Her grip was firm and cool. "Daniel, my husband and Toby's father, couldn't make it today. He's in Boston for business until Thursday." Harper nodded, gesturing toward the examination table covered in crinkly paper. "Toby, would you like to hop up there for me? We'll make this quick and easy." The boy glanced at his stepmother, who gave him a slight nod. He moved to the table with the careful deliberation of someone much older, avoiding sudden movements. As he climbed up, Harper noticed him wince slightly, a momentary tightening around his eyes that most people would miss. "How's school going, Toby? 2nd grade, right?" Harper asked as she washed her hands thoroughly at the small sink. "It's fine," he answered quietly, his voice barely audible over the running water. "He's doing well academically," Vanessa interjected, setting her designer handbag on a chair, though his teacher mentioned he could participate more in class discussions. "He's always been shy, even before." She trailed off, then resumed with a practiced smile. "Well, even before I came into the picture." Harper dried her hands and approached Toby with a digital thermometer. "I'm just going to check your temperature and a few other things before we do the flu shot. Okay?" The routine examination proceeded smoothly, temperature normal, heart rate slightly elevated but within range for a child anticipating a needle. Blood pressure, height, and weight all recorded and within appropriate parameters for his age, though Harper noted he was on the lower end of the weight scale. "I need to check your reflexes and do a quick physical exam," Harper explained, reaching for the reflex hammer. "Have you had any colds or illnesses since your last visit?" Before Toby could answer, Vanessa spoke. "He had a nasty cold back in February and a stomach bug in May. Nothing serious." Harper made notes on her tablet while maintaining a warm expression for Toby. "Anything else? Any falls or injuries I should know about?" "He's a 7-year-old boy," Vanessa said with a light laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "He's always collecting scrapes and bruises. Clumsy as can be, Aren't you, Toby? The boy's gaze dropped to his lap. Yes, he whispered. Something in his posture, the slight curve of his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the edge of the examination table, triggered a familiar warning in Harper's mind. 15 years in pediatric care had honed her intuition. She'd learned to identify the subtle differences between a child who was simply nervous about a doctor's visit and one who carried heavier burdens. I'm going to need to check your legs and arms, Toby. Do you mind rolling up your sleeves and pants legs for me? Harper kept her tone light, but watched carefully for his reaction. The boy's eyes darted to Vanessa again before he slowly pushed up the sleeves of his navy shirt. His arms showed nothing unusual, a small scratch on his right forearm that looked to be healing normally, but nothing concerning. Great job, Harper encouraged. Now let's check those legs. Toby hesitated longer this time before carefully rolling up his jeans. Harper maintained her professional expression, but her pulse quickened at what she saw. On his right calf, a pattern of bruising showed distinct finger-shaped marks, yellowing at the edges, at least a week old. On his left thigh, partially visible below his shorts, was a larger, fresher bruise with an unusual linear pattern. That's quite a bruise, buddy, Harper said conversationally while her mind raced through potential explanations. Can you tell me what happened? Before Toby could speak, Vanessa stepped closer. He fell off his bike last weekend. Landed right on the handlebar. Didn't you, Toby? Her voice remained pleasant, but Harper noticed how her hand came to rest on the boy's shoulder, fingers pressing slightly. Toby nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. Yes, I fell. Harper made a note on her tablet, keeping her face neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. The bruise pattern didn't match a handlebar injury. The finger marks on his calf couldn't be explained away by a bike accident. And the timing didn't align with the different healing stages of the bruises. Well, accidents happen, she said lightly. Toby, I need to take your blood pressure one more time. And Vanessa, while we're finishing up, would you mind filling out an updated emergency contact form? Our system updated last month, and we need new information from all our patients. Jenna at the front desk has the paperwork ready. Vanessa hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly. Can't I do that after his appointment? It'll save you time at checkout, Harper explained with a reassuring smile. And it should only take about 5 minutes. We just need to make sure we have the most current information in case of emergencies. After another moment's hesitation, Vanessa nodded. All right, I'll be right back, Toby. Be good for Nurse Fletcher. The last sentence carried a subtle edge that made the hair on the back of Harper's neck stand up. Once Vanessa left the room, Harper moved with quick efficiency. Toby, I need to take a few pictures of your legs for our medical records. Is that okay? The boy looked uncertain but gave a small nod. Harper used the hospital's secure medical documentation tablet to photograph the bruises, carefully ensuring they were clear and in focus. Toby, she said gently, crouching to his eye level. I want you to know that you can tell me anything and it stays between us. Did something else happen to cause these bruises? His eyes, deep brown and wide with an emotion Harper couldn't quite identify. Fear? Hope? Locked with hers for a brief moment. His lips parted slightly, but then footsteps sounded in the hallway outside. Toby's expression shuddered instantly, and he looked away. I fell, he repeated, his voice hollow. Harper straightened as the door began to open, but not before whispering. I believe you deserve to be safe, Toby. Instead of Vanessa, it was Dr. Nathan Cooper who entered, a tall man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Harper had paged him with their emergency signal, a request for patient history review, their code for situations requiring immediate consultation. Good afternoon, Toby, Dr. Cooper said cheerfully. I'm Dr. Cooper. Nurse Fletcher asked me to stop by while she prepares your flu shot. Harper showed Dr. Cooper the tablet with the photographs while standing at an angle that blocked Toby's view. The doctor's expression remained neutral, but the slight tightening around his eyes told Harper he shared her concerns. Toby, would you mind if I take a quick look at your legs too? Dr. Cooper asked. When Toby nodded his permission, The doctor examined the bruises with gentle, practiced hands. Does this hurt when I press here? Toby winced slightly and nodded. How about here? Dr. Cooper asked, touching a different spot. A little, Toby admitted. Dr. Cooper gave the boy a reassuring smile. Thank you for being so brave. Harper, could you go ahead with the flu shot while I update the chart? While Harper administered the vaccination, Dr. Cooper made notes in Toby's electronic record. Their eyes met briefly over the boy's head, a silent confirmation passing between them. The bruising patterns were inconsistent with accidental injury. Their shape, location, and varying stages of healing pointed to something far more concerning. Harper applied a colorful dinosaur bandage to Toby's arm. All done. You did great. Would you like to choose a sticker from our treasure box? As Toby carefully selected a sticker, a silver star that he held carefully, as though it might break, the door opened again. Vanessa returned, slightly flushed, paperwork in hand. All finished with these forms, she said, then stopped short at the sight of Dr. Cooper. I didn't realize the doctor would be coming in. Dr. Cooper often checks in during vaccinations, Harper explained smoothly, especially when patients are due for their annual wellness check. Everything looks good, Dr. Cooper said with a professional smile, though his eyes remained serious. However, Mrs. Winters, I did notice some bruising on Toby's legs that I'd like to discuss. Vanessa's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. As I told Nurse Fletcher, he fell off his bike last weekend. Boys will be boys, you know. Of course, Dr. Cooper nodded. However, the pattern of bruising shows different stages of healing, suggesting injuries that occurred at different times. And the shape of some of the bruises doesn't quite match with a bike accident. What exactly are you implying? Vanessa's voice took on a dangerous edge. We're not implying anything, Mrs. Winters, Dr. Cooper said calmly. As medical professionals, we're required to document and follow up on any injuries that appear unusual. Well, I can assure you there's nothing unusual about an active 7-year-old getting bumps and bruises, Vanessa said, reaching for her handbag. Toby, put your sticker away. We're leaving. Harper exchanged a quick glance with Dr. Cooper before addressing Vanessa. Mrs. Winters, we still need to schedule Toby's follow-up for his complete annual physical. It's been almost 10 months since his last one. We'll schedule it another time, Vanessa said sharply, her hand closing around Toby's wrist. The boy flinched but remained silent. Come on, Toby. Mrs. Winters, Dr. Cooper tried again. I should inform you that as mandated reporters, if we have reasonable cause to suspect. Are you threatening me? Vanessa's voice was low and dangerous now. My husband is a personal friend of hospital board director Philip Montgomery. I suggest you consider very carefully before making accusations based on a bike accident. No one is making accusations, Harper said calmly. We're simply following standard medical protocols. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. I'll be speaking to my lawyer about this harassment. Come on, Toby. Now. As Vanessa pulled him toward the door, Toby looked back over his shoulder at Harper. In that brief moment, his eyes held a mixture of fear and something else, a desperate hope that made Harper's heart clench. Then they were gone, the door closing firmly behind them. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken urgency. Those bruises, Dr. Cooper said quietly, the finger mark patterns on his calf, the linear bruising consistent with a belt or cord on his thigh, and the different healing stages, Harper added, her voice tight. This isn't the first time, and it doesn't match her explanation. Did you notice how he kept looking to her before answering any questions? Dr. Cooper asked. Harper nodded grimly, and his flinch when she grabbed his wrist. Nathan, we need to report this immediately. Agreed. Dr. Cooper's expression was solemn. I'll call Child Protective Services right now. You documented the injuries. Yes, I took photos while she was filling out the forms. And I noted his reduced weight compared to his last visit. Dr. Cooper squeezed her shoulder briefly. Good work, Harper. You may have just saved that boy from something much worse. as Dr. Cooper left to make the necessary calls, Harper sank into her chair, the weight of what she'd just witnessed settling over her. The memory of Toby's desperate glance stayed with her, a silent plea from a child who couldn't speak for himself. She thought about her own childhood, about the neighbor boy whose bruises had been explained away by parents everyone in town respected, whose cries she'd heard at night through her bedroom window. How no one had ever questioned, not even when he'd stopped coming to school altogether. The adults had simply accepted the family's move to another state without suspicion. Not this time, Harper whispered to herself, straightening her shoulders as she prepared the report for CPS. Not on my watch. Outside the window, rain had begun to fall, drops streaming down the glass like tears. Harper's reflection stared back at her, determined and resolute. For Toby, the storm was just beginning, but for the first time, someone was looking beneath the surface of his silence and refusing to look away. By 5:30 that evening, Harper's small office had become the center of a rapidly unfolding investigation. Detective Jack Reeves from Millbrook Police Department's Special Victims Unit sat across from her desk, his weathered face serious as he reviewed the photographs and medical notes. The bruising patterns are consistent with grabbing and striking with an object, Harper explained, pointing to specific areas in the images. The varying colors indicate different healing stages. Some are at least a week old, others more recent. Reeves nodded, his gray eyes narrowed in concentration. At 53, he'd spent the last 20 years investigating cases involving children and carried each one in the lines of his face. And the boy's explanation? He didn't give one, not really, Harper replied. His stepmother immediately jumped in with the bike accident story. Toby just echoed her. What about prior injuries? Any hospital records? That's what's interesting, Harper said, pulling up another screen on her computer. I checked our system after they left. Toby has been treated at 4 different medical facilities in the past year: ankle sprain at Portland General, wrist fracture at the Westbrook Urgent Care, concussion at Brunswick Memorial, and strep throat here. Different doctors, different explanations each time. Reeves frowned. Classic pattern. Moving between facilities to avoid raising red flags. He made a note in his small leather-bound notebook. What about the father? Daniel Winters, correct? Yes. According to Vanessa, he's away on business frequently. He wasn't present at any of the medical visits I could find records for. The detective leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Winters. That's Winters Construction, right? Big commercial development company. Harper nodded. They're responsible for half the new buildings downtown. Daniel Winters is considered something of a local success story. Grew up in the poorer part of town, built his business from scratch. And the stepmother? What do we know about her? Not much, Harper admitted. She mentioned they've been married for about a year. Toby's biological mother died in a car accident 2 years ago. Reeves scribbled another note. I'll run a background check on Vanessa Winters immediately. What's your read on her, Nurse Fletcher? Trust your instincts here. Harper considered the question carefully. Controlling, very aware of appearances. There was something rehearsed about her explanations, and she was quick to leverage connections and threaten legal action. Defensive behaviors, Reeves observed. Not uncommon when abusers feel cornered. He closed his notebook and stood. We'll move quickly on this. Child Protective Services has already been notified, and they're sending a caseworker to do a home assessment tomorrow morning. In the meantime, I'll get the background checks running and start interviewing Toby's teachers. What happens to Toby tonight? Harper asked, unable to keep the concern from her voice. Reeves's expression softened slightly. Without more definitive evidence, CPS can't remove him from the home yet. But they'll be watching closely, and after tomorrow's home visit, we'll have more to go on. The thought of Toby returning to that house made Harper's stomach clench. She knows we're suspicious now. What if she? That's why we're moving fast, Reeves assured her. And why we're keeping an eye on the residents tonight. Vanessa Winters won't know it, but there will be a patrol car making regular passes by their house. Harper nodded, wishing they could do more but understanding the legal constraints. What can I do to help? You've already done the crucial part, Reeves said, tucking his notebook into his jacket pocket. You saw what others missed. Now document everything, any interactions with the family, any additional medical records you can access ethically. And be prepared, if this goes to court, your testimony will be essential. As Reeves turned to leave, Harper asked one last question. Detective, in your experience, what are the chances this ends with Toby being safe? The detective paused at the door. That depends on what we find. But I've seen cases like this go both ways. The fact that you caught it, that we're moving quickly, that gives him a better chance than most. His expression hardened. And I don't intend to let this boy fall through the cracks. After Reeves left, Harper remained at her desk, staring at Toby's file on her screen. The boy's school photo showed a solemn face with eyes too old for a 7-year-old. Harper thought about her own empty apartment waiting for her. The quiet evening ahead normally filled with a glass of wine and a novel. Tonight, she knew sleep would be elusive. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Cooper. Good work today. Want to grab dinner and decompress? Harper appreciated the offer. Nathan had been her colleague and friend for over a decade, and he understood the emotional toll these cases took. But tonight, she needed solitude to process what had happened. Rain check, she texted back. Need some time with this one. His response came quickly. Understood. You did the right thing, H. Get some rest. Harper gathered her things and headed out into the rainy evening. As she drove through the quiet streets of Millbrook, past neatly maintained houses with glowing windows and families gathering for dinner, she couldn't stop thinking about one small boy lying awake in his bed, perhaps wondering if anyone would ever truly see him. I see you, Toby, she whispered to herself as the windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm against the rain. And I won't look away. She drove home through the darkness, carrying the weight of silent wounds that had finally begun to speak. Morning arrived with a clarity that belied the turbulence of the previous day. Harper's kitchen was bathed in pale autumn sunlight as she prepared her coffee, the familiar ritual doing little to settle her restless thoughts. She had slept poorly, her dreams haunted by a pair of brown eyes looking back at her in silent plea. The call from Detective Reeves came just after 7, his voice carrying the gruff edge of someone who had been awake for hours. The CPS caseworker is heading to the Winters residence at 9, he informed her. Thought you'd want to know we're moving forward. Thank you, Harper said, cradling the phone against her shoulder as she poured her coffee. Any developments overnight? Nothing concerning at the residence, Reeves replied. But I've been digging into Vanessa Winters' background. It's interesting. Something in his tone made Harper pause. Interesting how? She's only been Vanessa Winters for about 14 months. Before that, she was Vanessa Mercer. And before that, she was Vanessa Hartley. 3 names in 5 years. Harper frowned. Multiple marriages? 1 divorce, 1 marriage. The name change between Hartley and Mercer wasn't through marriage. It was a legal petition. And here's where it gets concerning. I can't find much record of Vanessa Hartley before she moved to Maine 7 years ago. It's like she appeared out of nowhere. Could she be hiding something? Harper asked, a prickle of unease running down her spine. That's what I'm trying to find out. I've got calls in to authorities in Massachusetts, where she supposedly lived before. Oh, and I found something else. She worked at Lakeside Youth Center from 2018 to 2020. Harper recognized the name. That's the residential facility for troubled teens that closed down after those abuse allegations. Right? The very one. No charges were ever filed against specific staff members, but the investigation found evidence of excessive discipline and isolation practices. By the time it all came out, Vanessa had already left her position there. Harper sank into a kitchen chair, the implications settling heavily. So we have a woman with a mysterious background who worked at a facility with a history of child abuse, who now has a stepson with unexplained injuries. Exactly, Reeves confirmed. I'm still working on getting access to sealed records that might tell us more, but it's a start. What about Daniel Winters, Toby's father? On paper, he looks clean. built his construction company from the ground up, well respected in the business community. After his first wife died in that car accident, he had sole custody of Toby for about a year before marrying Vanessa. I'll be interviewing him this afternoon when he returns from his business trip. Do you think he knows? Harper couldn't help asking. About Toby's injuries, I mean. Reeves was silent for a moment. That's what I intend to find out. In my experience, there are 3 possibilities. He's directly involved, he's willfully ignorant, or he's genuinely unaware. We'll see which it is. After ending the call, Harper finished her coffee and prepared for her shift. The hospital was only a 15-minute drive from her small cottage on the outskirts of Millbrook. As she drove through town, she passed Millbrook Elementary School, where Toby attended 2nd grade. Children were already arriving, colorful backpacks bobbing as they made their way inside. Harper wondered if Toby was among them, or if Vanessa had kept him home today, away from observant teachers. The morning at the hospital passed in a blur of routine vaccinations and minor ailments. Harper moved through her duties with practiced efficiency, but her mind kept returning to the Winters case. Shortly before noon, Dr. Cooper found her in the staff room, his expression grim. I just got off the phone with Amanda Chun from CPS, he said, lowering his voice though they were alone in the room. She conducted the home visit this morning. Harper set down her half-eaten sandwich. And the house was immaculate, no visible safety concerns. Toby was present, polite, and showed no obvious signs of distress. Vanessa was, in Amanda's words, the perfect picture of a concerned mother. That doesn't surprise me, Harper said, disappointment settling in her chest. She strikes me as someone who's very careful about appearances. Dr. Cooper nodded. Amanda thought the same thing. She noted that the interaction between Toby and Vanessa seemed rehearsed, like they'd practiced what to say. And she made another interesting observation. There were no photos of Toby and his father together in the house. Plenty of Vanessa and Daniel, but none with Toby. That seems odd for a family home. It does. Amanda's keeping the case open, but without more evidence, her hands are tied. She can't remove Toby based on what we've seen so far. Harper pushed her lunch aside, appetite gone. So we're just supposed to wait until he shows up with more injuries? Not exactly, Dr. Cooper said, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Amanda recommended court-ordered medical monitoring, weekly checkups for Toby that can't be rescheduled or moved between facilities. It's not a perfect solution, but it would give us regular contact with him, a chance to document any new injuries, and possibly build enough trust for him to talk. Do you think the court will grant it? With the evidence we have, yes. The different patterns of bruising at various healing stages, combined with the scattered medical visits to different facilities, should be enough to convince a judge. Dr. Cooper checked his watch. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Detective Reeves thinks we have a good chance. Harper nodded, a small measure of relief tempering her concern. At least it's something. A way to keep eyes on him. Exactly. And speaking of keeping eyes on him, Amanda mentioned something else. Vanessa seemed abnormally interested in who had reported them. She kept trying to steer the conversation back to that. She suspects it was us, Harper said. It wasn't a question. Almost certainly. Which means you need to be prepared for potential backlash, Harper. People like Vanessa don't take kindly to being exposed. Harper thought of Vanessa's veiled threat about her husband's connection to the hospital board. I can handle whatever she throws at me. I'm more worried about Toby. Dr. Cooper squeezed her shoulder briefly. I know. But remember, you've already done the hardest part. Seeing what others missed and speaking up. Now we work within the system to protect him. He paused, studying her face. This case is getting to you more than usual. It wasn't a question, and Harper didn't pretend to misunderstand. I keep thinking about Jamie Collins. Understanding dawned in Dr. Cooper's eyes. Jamie Collins had been a neighborhood boy from Harper's childhood. A quiet 9-year-old whose bruises and broken arm had been explained away by his prominent parents. One day, the Collins family had simply moved away without warning. Years later, news had broken that Jamie had died from internal injuries shortly after their move, his parents eventually convicted of manslaughter. "This isn't the same situation, Dr. Cooper said gently. "Jamie didn't have you fighting for him." Harper managed a small smile. "I know. I just can't help seeing him when I look at Toby." "Use that, but don't let it consume you," Dr. Cooper advised. "Channel it into doing everything by the book so this case is airtight." Harper nodded, drawing strength from his steadying presence. Nathan Cooper had been both mentor and friend since her first day at Millbrook Community Hospital. His calm guidance had helped her navigate countless difficult cases. "I should get back to my rounds," she said, standing. "Let me know as soon as you hear anything about the court order." Dr. Cooper promised he would, and Harper returned to her afternoon appointments, her purpose renewed by their conversation. Each child she treated received her full professional attention, but between patients, her thoughts returned to Toby. What was happening in that pristine house with its absence of family photos? What went on when no one was watching? The next morning found Harper sitting on a hard wooden bench outside Courtroom B in the Millbrook County Courthouse. The building's imposing granite facade housed a surprisingly mundane interior of beige walls and scuffed floors that smelled faintly of floor polish and anxiety. Detective Reeves sat beside her, reviewing notes in his leather-bound notebook. Across the hallway, a woman Harper recognized as Amanda Chun from Child Protective Services was engaged in a hushed conversation with the county prosecutor. Dr. Cooper had been called to an emergency at the hospital, but his detailed affidavit lay in a folder on Harper's lap. "Nervous?" Reeves asked without looking up from his notes. "A little," Harper admitted. "I've testified in court before, but never for something that felt this precarious." Reeves nodded. "These cases always are. We're essentially asking a judge to intervene in a family situation based on evidence that suggests but doesn't prove abuse. It's a delicate balance between protecting the child and respecting parental rights." "I understand that," Harper said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her charcoal gray skirt. She had dressed carefully this morning, choosing her most professional outfit. The skirt paired with a pale blue blouse and black blazer. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her only jewelry a pair of small pearl earrings and her mother's silver watch. "I just keep thinking about what happens if we fail. Then we keep watching, documenting, and building a stronger case," Reeves replied, finally looking up. His gray eyes held the steady resolve of someone who had fought these battles many times before. Child protection is rarely a single skirmish, Nurse Fletcher. Sometimes it's a long campaign. The courthouse doors at the end of the hallway swung open, and Harper's breath caught as Daniel and Vanessa Winters entered, accompanied by a sleek man in an expensive suit who could only be their attorney. Daniel Winters was taller than Harper had imagined, with dark hair graying at the temples and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to commanding respect. In his tailored navy suit, he looked every inch the successful businessman. Vanessa walked half a step behind him, elegant in a cream-colored dress that managed to convey both modesty and wealth. Her eyes scanned the hallway and narrowed when they landed on Harper. The look she gave her was brief but venomous, before her face smoothed back into a mask of composed concern. Toby was not with them, which Harper had expected. Children were rarely required to attend these preliminary hearings. "That's Thomas Blackwell with them," Reeves murmured. "One of the top family attorneys in the state. They're not messing around." "Should we be worried?" Harper asked quietly. "Not necessarily. It's what I'd expect from people of their standing." Reeves closed his notebook. "Just stick to the medical facts, what you observed, and your professional assessment. Don't let Blackwell rattle you if he gets aggressive." Before Harper could respond, the bailiff appeared at the courtroom door. "In the matter of the health and welfare monitoring of Toby Winters, all parties please enter." The courtroom was smaller than Harper had anticipated, with just 3 rows of benches behind the attorneys' tables. Judge Eleanor Harmon presided from the bench, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver hair cut in a precise bob. Her reputation for being fair but unsentimental preceded her. The proceedings moved quickly once everyone was seated. The county prosecutor, Diane Wright, presented their case first, outlining the medical evidence and the pattern of seeking treatment at different facilities. Harper testified about her observations during Toby's appointment, describing the bruising patterns and Vanessa's behavior with clinical precision. When Thomas Blackwell cross-examined her, his approach was surprisingly gentle but probing. Nurse Fletcher, in your 15 years of pediatric experience, is it uncommon to see active boys with multiple bruises? He asked. It's not uncommon to see bruising in active children, Harper replied carefully. What was concerning in Toby's case was the specific patterns of the bruises, their locations, and the various stages of healing that indicated injuries occurring at different times. Could the different stages of healing not be explained by a very active child who plays rough regularly? The specific bruising patterns I observed were inconsistent with typical play injuries, Harper stated firmly. The finger-shaped marks on his calf and the linear bruising on his thigh are not patterns we typically see from falls or normal childhood activities. Blackwell nodded thoughtfully, as though considering her expertise. And you took these photographs while Mrs. Winters was out of the room, correct? Without her knowledge or consent. Harper felt a flash of uncertainty but maintained her professional demeanor. I documented the injuries according to hospital protocol when I observed what appeared to be non-accidental trauma. As a mandated reporter, I'm required by law to document and report such observations. Yes or no, Nurse Fletcher? Did you have Mrs. Winters' consent to photograph her stepson? No, I did not, Harper admitted. But parental consent is not required when documenting suspected abuse under the Child Protection Act, Section 14. Blackwell's eyes hardened slightly at her knowledge of the legal statute, but he maintained his courteous tone. One final question. Did Toby Winters ever state to you that anyone had hurt him? No, Harper said. But in my experience, children rarely disclose abuse directly, especially when the alleged abuser is present or nearby. Thank you, Nurse Fletcher. No further questions. Detective Reeves testified next, presenting his findings about the scattered medical visits and Vanessa's concerning employment history at Lakeside Youth Center. Amanda Chun described her observations during the home visit, particularly the rehearsed quality of the interactions and the absence of family photos including Toby. When it was the defense's turn, Daniel Winters took the stand, his deep voice carrying easily through the courtroom. He expressed shock and distress at the allegations, insisting he had never seen concerning injuries on his son. Toby's mother died 2 years ago, he explained, his expression somber. He's still processing that loss. He's always been a quiet boy, but yes, he's become more withdrawn since Jessica's death. Vanessa has been a blessing, helping him through this difficult time. And the injuries noted by the medical staff? Judge Harmon asked directly. Daniel looked genuinely puzzled. I travel frequently for work, Your Honor. I wasn't aware of any concerning injuries. Toby has always been active. He plays soccer and rides his bike. Children get bumps and bruises. Had I seen anything concerning, I would have addressed it immediately. And the multiple medical facilities? The judge pressed. Simple convenience, Your Honor. When Toby needed medical attention, they went to whichever facility was closest or could see him soonest. There was no intention to hide anything. Vanessa's testimony echoed her husband's, portraying herself as a dedicated stepmother doing her best with a troubled child. She became tearful when describing her efforts to connect with Toby and her distress at being vilified for normal parenting challenges. Throughout the testimonies, Harper watched Judge Harmon carefully. The judge's expression revealed little, but her questions were pointed and thorough, particularly regarding the medical evidence. After a brief recess, Judge Harmon delivered her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I find sufficient cause for concern to warrant a temporary order for medical monitoring. Her stern gaze swept the courtroom. This is not a finding of abuse, but rather a precautionary measure to ensure the child's well-being while a more thorough investigation proceeds. She outlined the terms. Toby would undergo weekly medical checkups at Millbrook Community Hospital for the next 6 weeks. These appointments could not be rescheduled without court approval or moved to different facilities. A CPS caseworker would make biweekly home visits. The situation would be reviewed in 6 weeks to determine if the monitoring should continue or if further intervention was necessary. I want to be absolutely clear, Judge Harmon concluded, her voice leaving no room for argument. This court's primary concern is the welfare of the child. These measures are not punitive but protective. All parties are expected to comply fully with this order. As the judge rose and left the courtroom, Harper felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They had secured regular access to Toby, a vital first step, but the weeks ahead would be critical. Would it be enough time to build trust with the boy? To gather more concrete evidence if abuse was indeed occurring? And how would Vanessa react to this public challenge to her authority? As if sensing her thoughts, Vanessa turned in her seat, her gaze finding Harper's across the courtroom. The look in her eyes made Harper's blood run cold. Not anger, but something more calculated. Promise. Daniel placed a hand on his wife's shoulder, and she turned away, composing herself as they stood to leave with their attorney. Harper watched them go, unable to shake the feeling that this victory might have unforeseen consequences. "Round one to us," Reeves murmured beside her. "But stay alert. Women like Vanessa don't take defeat well." "I'm more concerned about Toby," Harper said. "She knows we're watching now. What if that makes things worse for him? That's why the weekly checkups are so important. If anything escalates, we'll know quickly." Reeves gathered his notes. "And it gives you a chance to build rapport with him. Children often disclose to the first adult who makes them feel truly safe." Harper nodded, accepting the responsibility that came with that reality. As they left the courthouse, stepping into the crisp autumn air, she found herself looking up at the blue sky and wondering if Toby could see it too, if he understood that people were fighting for him now. The first of Toby's mandated checkups was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Harper arrived at the hospital an hour early, reviewing his complete medical history and preparing the examination room with extra care. She placed a selection of children's books on the side table and made sure the room's atmosphere was as non-threatening as possible. Dr. Cooper stopped by as she was arranging colored pencils and paper, tools that sometimes helped children express what they couldn't say aloud. "All set?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I think so," Harper replied. "I'm trying to find the balance between a normal checkup and creating opportunities for him to open up." "You're good at this, Harper. Trust your instincts." Dr. Cooper glanced at his watch. "I've cleared my schedule to be available if you need me, but I think it's better if you handle this alone initially. Too many adults can be overwhelming." Harper agreed. "I'll page you if anything comes up that requires your expertise." "One more thing, Dr. Cooper said, his expression growing serious. "Daniel Winters came by my office yesterday." Harper's eyebrows rose in surprise. "What did he want?" "To express his concern about the situation and assure me of his cooperation with the court order." Dr. Cooper's brow furrowed slightly. "He seemed genuinely distressed by the allegations, Harper. Either he's an exceptional actor, or he truly had no idea about the potential abuse." "What's your read on him?" Dr. Cooper considered the question. "He strikes me as a man who delegates, both in business and at home. He mentioned working 70-hour weeks to grow his company, traveling frequently. It's possible he's simply been absent enough that he missed the signs." "That's its own form of neglect," Harper pointed out. "Yes, but a very common one in high-achieving parents who convince themselves they're providing for their children by building financial security." Dr. Cooper sighed. "The other possibility is that he knows something isn't right but can't bring himself to acknowledge it. The mind has remarkable abilities to ignore what it doesn't want to see." Their conversation was interrupted by a notification on Harper's phone. The Winters had arrived for the appointment. Dr. Cooper wished her luck and departed, leaving Harper to center herself before meeting them. To her surprise, it was Daniel who accompanied Toby this time, not Vanessa. The businessman looked somewhat out of place in the pediatric wing, his expensive suit contrasting with the colorful wall murals of cartoon animals. Toby walked beside him, wearing jeans and a long-sleeved green sweater despite the warmth of the heated building. "Mr. Winters, Toby," Harper greeted them professionally. "Please come in." Daniel shook her hand firmly. "Nurse Fletcher, I believe this is our first time meeting in person." His direct gaze held none of the hostility she had expected, though there was a watchfulness there, an assessment. Up close, Harper could see the resemblance between father and son. They shared the same straight nose and chin, though Toby's features were softer, still holding the roundness of childhood. "Toby, would you like to hop up on the examination table?" Harper asked gently. "We're just doing a regular checkup today." The boy complied silently, his movements still carrying that careful quality she had noticed during his previous visit. "Where's Vanessa today?" Harper asked casually as she prepared her equipment. "She had a charity committee meeting she couldn't reschedule," Daniel replied. "But I wanted to be here anyway. I've cleared my Tuesday afternoons for these appointments going forward." Harper nodded, noting the commitment but reserving judgment. "Toby, I'm going to check your temperature and blood pressure first, just like last time. Is that okay?" The boy nodded, his eyes darting briefly to his father before focusing on his own hands. Harper proceeded with the standard examination, maintaining a gentle running commentary of what she was doing to put him at ease. Daniel watched attentively, occasionally asking relevant questions about Toby's health. "I'll need to check for any new injuries or concerns," Harper explained when they reached that point in the examination. "Toby, can you roll up your sleeves and pant legs for me?" Again, Toby glanced at his father before complying. Harper kept her expression neutral as she examined his arms and legs, but her heart sank at what she found. The bruises she had documented previously were fading, but new ones had appeared, smaller but unmistakable finger mark patterns on his upper arms. "These bruises here," Harper said professionally. "How did they happen, Toby?" Before Toby could respond, Daniel stepped closer, his brow furrowing as he examined the marks. "I hadn't noticed those. Toby, when did this happen?" The boy's eyes widened slightly, a flash of panic crossing his face. I don't remember." Daniel looked genuinely troubled. "Son, it's important to tell Nurse Fletcher the truth. Did you fall during soccer practice?" Toby shook his head, then seemed to reconsider. "Maybe. I don't know." Harper noted the confusion in her chart, then continued the examination. When she asked Toby to lift his shirt so she could listen to his heart and lungs, she found more concerning marks. A cluster of small, round bruises along his ribcage that looked like fingerprints from someone gripping him forcefully. Daniel's expression darkened when he saw them. "What are those from?" he asked, his voice tighter than before. "I fell," Toby said quickly. Too quickly. "Against the bathroom counter." Harper met Daniel's eyes over Toby's head, seeing confusion and the beginnings of genuine concern there. She finished the examination and then suggested that Toby might like to draw while she discussed some routine health matters with his father. Once Toby was settled at the small table with colored pencils and paper, Harper led Daniel to the corner of the room, speaking in a low voice. "Mr. Winters, the bruising patterns I'm seeing are consistent with someone gripping Toby forcefully. They don't match accidental falls." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his confidence visibly shaken. "What are you saying, exactly?" "I'm saying these injuries are concerning and consistent with the patterns we observed last week. They appear to be inflicted, not accidental." Daniel's face paled slightly. "You think someone is hurting my son deliberately?" It wasn't a question, but Harper answered anyway. "Yes, that's my professional assessment." "But who would?" He stopped abruptly, the implication hanging in the air between them. Harper remained silent, letting him process. Her gaze drifted to Toby, who was bent over his drawing, seemingly absorbed but with tension visible in his small shoulders. "Vanessa adores him," Daniel said, but his voice held a new uncertainty. "She gave up her career to be a full-time mother to him after Jessica died." Harper chose her words carefully. "Mr. Winters, in my experience, what happens in a home isn't always visible to everyone who lives there, especially to someone who travels frequently for work." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I should be going with you to see what Toby's drawing. I'm paying attention now, Nurse Fletcher. To everything." They approached Toby together. The boy had drawn a house, a large two-story structure that Harper assumed represented the Winters home. 3 figures stood outside. A tall man in a suit, a woman with yellow hair, and a smaller figure standing apart from them. Dark clouds loomed overhead, and the small figure's face was drawn with a flat line for a mouth. "That's a very detailed drawing, Toby," Harper said. "Can you tell me about it?" Toby shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "It's just our house." "And is that you with your dad and Vanessa?" Harper asked gently. The boy nodded. "I notice the sun is hidden behind those clouds. Does it feel cloudy at home sometimes?" Toby's pencil stilled. He glanced up at his father, then back at the drawing. "Sometimes." Daniel crouched beside his son, studying the picture with new eyes. "Toby, remember what we talked about on the way here? About always telling the truth, even when it's hard." Toby nodded hesitantly. "Is there something you want to tell us? About how you got those bruises?" The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he shook his head firmly. "I can't." Harper felt her heart clench at the fear in those 2 simple words. Daniel seemed equally affected, placing a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "You can tell me anything, buddy. I promise I won't be mad." Toby's lower lip trembled. "She said you wouldn't believe me, that you'd be sad if I made up stories." Daniel went very still. "Who said that, Toby?" But the boy had already retreated into silence, turning his attention back to his drawing with fierce concentration. Harper could see the struggle playing out on Daniel's face, disbelief warring with dawning comprehension, then settling into something like resolve. "I think that's enough for today," Harper said gently. "Toby, you did great. Would you like to take your drawing home?" The boy shook his head emphatically. "Can I leave it here? For next time?" "Of course," Harper assured him. "I'll keep it safe for you." As they prepared to leave, Daniel pulled Harper aside once more. "I want to talk to Detective Reeves," he said quietly. "I've been blind to something, and I need to understand what's been happening in my home." Harper nodded, relief mixing with caution. "I'll let him know. And Mr. Winters, it might be best not to discuss your concerns with Vanessa just yet." Understanding flashed in his eyes. "Because if she is responsible, she might—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Just be observant," Harper advised. "And maybe consider taking fewer business trips for the time being." Daniel nodded grimly. "I've already canceled my appointments for the rest of the month. I'll be home every night." As they left, Harper noticed that Daniel kept his hand on Toby's shoulder, a protective gesture that seemed both reassuring and too late. She watched them walk down the corridor, the tall man and the small boy, wondering if this revelation would be enough to change the course of Toby's life. After they were gone, Harper carefully placed Toby's drawing in a folder to include with her case documentation. The simple image spoke volumes. The isolated child figure, the dark clouds, the flat line of a mouth that couldn't speak its truth. But today, with those 2 words, "I can't," Toby had begun to break his silence. It was a small crack in the facade, but sometimes that was all it took for the truth to finally emerge. Harper paged Dr. Cooper to update him on the appointment, her mind already planning for next week's session. The wheels of protection were turning, slowly but steadily. She only hoped they would turn fast enough to save one small boy from the shadows that had engulfed him for too long. The call came 3 days later, jolting Harper from sleep at 2:17 a.m. Detective Reeves' voice was tight with urgency. "Harper, we need you at Millbrook Memorial. Toby Winters was just brought in by ambulance. It's bad." She was fully awake instantly, already reaching for clothes in the darkness of her bedroom. "What happened?" Daniel Winters called 911. He came home from an unexpected late meeting and found Toby unconscious at the bottom of the stairs. He claims the boy fell, but the paramedics reported injuries inconsistent with a simple fall. "Vanessa?" Harper asked, pulling a sweater over her head. "That's the thing she's missing." Daniel says they had an argument earlier in the evening about his suspicions, and she left the house before he did. When he returned around midnight, she was gone, and Toby was injured. Harper's blood ran cold. "I'm on my way. 20 minutes. She made it in 15, breaking speed limits on the empty roads. Millbrook Memorial's emergency department was quietly bustling with the controlled chaos typical of night shifts. Harper found Detective Reeves in the hallway outside Trauma Room 3, his face grim in the harsh fluorescent lighting. "He's with Dr. Patel now," Reeves informed her. "Concussion, broken arm, multiple contusions. X-rays are being taken to rule out internal injuries." "Will he be okay?" The question caught in Harper's throat. "They think so." He regained consciousness in the ambulance. Reeves ran a hand over his face, the gesture revealing his exhaustion. "It could have been much worse." "Where's Daniel?" Giving his statement in the consultation room. "He's..." Distraught would be an understatement. Before Harper could respond, the trauma room door opened, and Dr. Ananya Patel emerged, her dark hair escaping from a hasty ponytail. She recognized Harper immediately. "He's asking for you, Dr. Patel said, her voice soft with surprise. He woke up and specifically asked for Nurse Harper. Something tightened in Harper's chest, a mixture of sorrow and vindication. "Can I see him?" Dr. Patel nodded. "Briefly. We're prepping him for surgery to set the fracture. It's a clean break of the radius, but it needs pinning." Harper entered the trauma room, her professional composure nearly crumbling at the sight of Toby's small form amid the medical equipment. His face was pale except for an angry bruise blossoming along his left cheekbone, and his arm was immobilized in a temporary splint. "Toby," she said gently, moving to his side. "I'm here." The boy's eyes fluttered open, his pupils unevenly dilated from the concussion. You said I deserve to be safe," he whispered. Harper carefully took his uninjured hand. "Yes, I did. And you do." "She pushed me," Toby said. His voice so faint Harper had to lean closer to hear it. "Because I told Dad about the closet. About how she locks me in when I'm bad." Harper squeezed his hand gently, her heart breaking even as she recognized the significance of his disclosure. "You're very brave to tell the truth, Toby." She said no one would believe me. A tear slipped from the corner of his eye. "But you did." "I did," Harper confirmed. "And now others believe you too. Your dad believes you." As if summoned by his mention, Daniel Winters appeared in the doorway, his face haggard with grief and guilt. The confident businessman was gone, replaced by a father confronting his worst failure. "Toby," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see." He moved to his son's bedside, opposite Harper, and carefully placed his hand on the boy's head. The tenderness of the gesture stood in stark contrast to the bruises marring Toby's skin. "Mr. Winters," Dr. Patel said from the doorway, "we need to take him to surgery now." Daniel nodded, not taking his eyes from his son's face. "I'll be right here when you wake up, buddy. I promise." As the trauma team prepared to move Toby, Harper stepped back, her role in this moment complete. In the hallway, she found Detective Reeves talking with a uniformed officer. "We've issued an APB for Vanessa Winters," he told Harper. "Her car was found abandoned at the Portland bus terminal, but we don't know where she's headed." "She knew it was over," Harper said. As soon as Daniel started asking questions, she knew her control was slipping. Reeves nodded grimly. Abusers like her can't stand losing control. When Daniel confronted her with his suspicions, she must have realized it was only a matter of time before Toby felt safe enough to talk. So she tried to silence him permanently. The reality of how close they had come to tragedy washed over Harper. If Daniel hadn't come home when he did. "But he did," Reeves reminded her. "Because you made him see what was happening. You created the crack in the facade that brought everything to light." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as Toby was wheeled toward the elevator that would take him to surgery. Daniel followed closely, his shoulders bent as though carrying an invisible weight. "We'll find her," Reeves promised, his voice hardening with determination. "People like Vanessa leave trails. Right now, every law enforcement agency in New England is looking for her." Harper nodded, but her focus remained on the elevator doors as they closed, taking Toby to the next stage of his ordeal. "What happens to him now?" she asked quietly. For tonight, a CPS caseworker will be stationed outside his room once he's out of surgery. Daniel will need to be evaluated before he's cleared to have unsupervised custody again. Reeves checked his phone as it buzzed with a message. I need to get back to the station to coordinate the search. Will you be staying? For a while, Harper confirmed. I want to be here when he wakes up. As Reeves departed, Harper found an empty chair in the surgical waiting area. Daniel sat alone in the corner, his head in his hands. She hesitated, unsure if her presence would be welcome, but something compelled her forward. Mr. Winters, she said softly, taking the seat beside him. Is there anyone I can call for you? He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. No, my parents are dead. My brother lives in Seattle. I don't. He broke off, swallowing hard. I don't have many people. Work consumed me after Jessica died. I thought I was doing the right thing by marrying again, giving Toby a mother figure. Harper didn't offer empty reassurances. The damage had been done, regardless of intentions. What made you start to suspect? She asked instead. Daniel ran a hand over his face. After our appointment on Tuesday, I started really watching, not just glancing and assuming everything was fine. I noticed how Toby flinched when Vanessa moved too quickly near him, how he barely spoke when she was in the room. His voice broke slightly, and I found locked cabinets in her home office with the records from all those different medical visits. She'd been hiding them from me. The confession of his blindness hung in the air between them. Harper thought of all the children she'd seen over the years whose parents were physically present but emotionally absent, too wrapped up in their own lives to notice the warning signs. You see it now, she said simply. That's what matters for Toby's future. Is it enough, though? Daniel asked, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. I failed him, my own son, and I failed to protect him. Harper considered her response carefully. Yes, you did, she acknowledged, refusing to offer hollow comfort. But you have a chance to do better now. That's more than many children in his situation ever get. Daniel nodded slowly, accepting both the truth of his failure and the possibility of redemption. They said the surgery will take about 2 hours. Would you stay? Toby trusts you. He might need a familiar face when he wakes up. I'll stay, Harper promised, and as the night deepened around the hospital, she remained, a sentinel for a child who had needed someone to see beneath the surface of his silence. The following weeks unfolded in a blur of developments. Vanessa Winters was apprehended 3 days later at a bus station in Montreal, attempting to cross into Canada with a fake passport. The media descended on Millbrook, transforming the private agony of one family into a public spectacle that divided the community. Many refused to believe that the elegant, charitable Vanessa could have systematically abused her stepson. Others, particularly among Daniel's business competitors, whispered that he must have known all along. The Winters house became a point of macabre interest, with curious onlookers driving slowly past the property. Through it all, Harper maintained her focus on the only thing that truly mattered, Toby's recovery. The boy spent 5 days in the hospital before being released into temporary foster care, while Daniel underwent evaluation by CPS. His physical healing progressed well. The broken arm was mending cleanly, the bruises fading, but the emotional wounds ran deeper. Harper visited him regularly, both professionally and, with the court's permission, as a supportive presence. Slowly, Toby began to reveal the extent of what he had endured. Punishments that included being locked in a closet for hours, pinches and slaps that left marks in places his father rarely saw, threats about what would happen if he ever told anyone. She said Dad would send me away if he knew I was bad, Toby confided during one of their sessions, his small fingers working methodically on a clay sculpture, that he was too busy for problem children. Harper's heart ached at the calculated cruelty of these threats, designed to exploit both a child's natural fears and the specific vulnerability of a boy who had already lost his mother. And you believed her, she said gently. It wasn't a question. Toby nodded, his focus on the clay. Dad was always working, and he seemed happy with her. I didn't want to make him sad again. Such moments of clarity from a 7-year-old were both heartbreaking and remarkable. Harper documented them all, building a comprehensive picture of the abuse for the prosecutors preparing the case against Vanessa. 3 weeks after the incident, Harper received an unexpected visitor at the hospital. Daniel Winters stood in the doorway of her office, looking both different from and similar to the man she had first met. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a simple button-down shirt. The confident bearing remained, but it was tempered now by a new humility. "Mr. Winters," Harper greeted him, setting aside the file she'd been reviewing. "What can I do for you?" "CPS has cleared me for supervised visits with Toby," he said, remaining in the doorway as though uncertain of his welcome. "I thought you should know." "That's good progress," Harper acknowledged. "How are the parenting classes going?" A flash of something. Annoyance? Recognition? Crossed his face before settling into resignation. Humbling. Necessary. He paused, then added, "I've learned more about child development in 3 weeks than in 7 years of being a father." Harper appreciated the honesty. "It's never too late to learn." "That's what I wanted to talk to you about, actually." Daniel finally stepped fully into the office. "The court is considering returning Toby to my custody next month, with continued supervision and therapy. I've downsized the company, delegated most of my responsibilities to focus on being present for him." Harper nodded encouragingly. "Those sound like positive steps." "They are, but they're not enough." Daniel took a deep breath. "Toby needs the people who made him feel safe, who saw him when I didn't." His therapist suggested that having a consistent support network would be vital for his recovery. "That's generally true for trauma survivors, yes. Which is why I wanted to ask." Daniel hesitated, then continued with determination. "Would you consider continuing to be part of Toby's life? Not just as his nurse, but as someone he trusts?" The therapist suggested regular check-ins with the adults who believed him when others didn't. The request caught Harper off guard. Professional boundaries existed for good reasons, and she had maintained them throughout her career. But Toby's situation was unique, and his needs complex. "I'd need to discuss this with Dr. Cooper and the hospital administration," she said cautiously. "There are ethical considerations about dual relationships." Daniel nodded. "I understand, but if it's possible, I think it would help him heal. You were the first person who really saw him." Harper thought of Toby's drawing, the isolated figure under dark clouds, and of Jamie Collins, the neighbor boy from her childhood who had never found someone to speak for him. "Let me look into the parameters of what would be appropriate," she said. "I do want what's best for Toby's recovery." After Daniel left, Harper sat quietly at her desk, contemplating the shifting boundaries of her involvement in this case. What had begun as professional obligation had evolved into something more personal, a commitment to one child that reflected her broader dedication to all the vulnerable children who crossed her path. She would need to be careful, to establish clear boundaries, but she couldn't deny the pull of responsibility toward Toby's future. Sometimes healing required more than medical protocols. It required human connection that transcended professional roles. With that thought in mind, Harper turned to her computer and began researching best practices for maintaining appropriate professional boundaries while supporting a child through long-term recovery from abuse. Whatever came next, she was determined that Toby would never again be left without someone willing to look beneath the surface of his silence. The preliminary hearing for Commonwealth v. Vanessa Winters took place on a cold November morning, with frost rhyming the courthouse steps and breath visible in the air. Harper arrived early, wrapped in a wool coat against the chill, to find a small crowd of reporters already gathered by the entrance. She slipped past them unnoticed, her testimony not scheduled until the afternoon. Inside, the courthouse bustled with the solemn energy of justice in process. Detective Reeves met her in the main hallway, offering a cup of coffee from the small kiosk in the corner. "Ready for this?" he asked as they found a quiet bench away from the crowd. "As ready as I can be," Harper replied, warming her hands on the paper cup. "How's Toby holding up?" "Remarkably well, considering. The prosecutor decided not to call him to testify today. His recorded statement should be sufficient for the preliminary hearing. If it goes to trial, that might change. Harper nodded, relieved that Toby would be spared the ordeal of facing Vanessa in court, at least for now. And Daniel? He's testifying this morning. He's been cooperative, even when it means admitting his own negligence. Reeves took a sip of his coffee. Between us, I think testifying is part of his penance, taking public responsibility. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Thomas Blackwell, the defense attorney who had represented the Winters family at the initial monitoring hearing. Now he represented only Vanessa, his expensive suit and confident stride at odds with the desperation of his client's position. "Nurse Fletcher," he acknowledged with a curt nod as he passed. "Detective." They watched him continue down the hallway, his leather briefcase swinging slightly with each step. "He's got an uphill battle," Reeves observed. "The evidence is overwhelming." "What's her defense?" Harper asked. "From what I've heard, she's claiming Toby's injuries were either accidental or self-inflicted, that he has behavioral issues stemming from his mother's death and Daniel's emotional absence." Harper felt a surge of indignation. "That's a desperate strategy," Reeves finished for her, "and one that rarely succeeds when faced with medical evidence as clear as what we have. The prosecution has your documentation, Dr. Cooper's assessment, and now the injuries from the staircase incident, which the medical examiner has definitively stated are inconsistent with a fall." The courtroom doors opened, and people began filing in for the morning session. Harper and Reeves remained on their bench, finishing their coffee in contemplative silence. They would enter when called to testify, not before. The morning passed slowly. Harper reviewed her notes and prepared mentally for the questions she would face on the stand. Around noon, Daniel emerged from the courtroom, his face drawn but his shoulders straight. He spotted Harper and approached. "They're in recess until 1:30, he informed her. "You'll be after Dr. Cooper." "How did it go in there?" Harper asked. Daniel's expression was complex, part relief, part lingering shame. "I told the truth, about how much I traveled, how little attention I paid to what was happening at home, about finding those hidden medical records." He swallowed hard. "And about how Toby begged me not to leave him alone with her that night, but I had a meeting I thought couldn't wait." The raw honesty in his voice spoke of a man confronting the consequences of choices made and unmade. Harper offered no absolution. It wasn't hers to give. Instead, she simply nodded her acknowledgement of his truth. "Vanessa looked different," Daniel added after a moment. "Smaller, somehow. Prison hasn't been kind to her." "Few things are kind to those who harm children," Reeves remarked, his voice neutral but his meaning clear. Daniel nodded, accepting this reality. "I should get some lunch before the afternoon session. Toby has therapy at 4, and I promised I'd be there." After he left, Harper and Reeves made their way to the courthouse cafeteria, a utilitarian space with plastic chairs and the smell of institutional coffee. They ate quickly, neither particularly hungry but aware of the long afternoon ahead. At exactly 1:30, the proceedings resumed. Dr. Cooper testified first, his calm professionalism lending weight to his assessment of Toby's injuries. Harper was called next, climbing the steps to the witness stand with steady determination. The prosecutor, Diane Wright, led her through a series of questions about her observations during Toby's appointments, the documentation of his injuries, and her professional assessment of their cause. Harper spoke clearly and directly, her answers focused on medical facts rather than emotional reactions. When Thomas Blackwell rose for cross-examination, his approach was more aggressive than it had been at the monitoring hearing. Gone was the veneer of respectful inquiry, replaced by a sharp-edged attempt to undermine her credibility. "Nurse Fletcher, you took quite a personal interest in this case, didn't you?" he began, pacing slightly before the witness stand. "I took appropriate professional interest in a patient showing signs of abuse," Harper corrected calmly. "So personal that you've continued to visit Toby Winters even after he was placed in foster care? Is that correct?" "I've maintained a supportive professional relationship with a traumatized child. Yes." with the court's permission and within appropriate boundaries. Blackwell changed tactics. You've testified that the bruising patterns you observed were, in your opinion, consistent with abuse. But isn't it true that similar patterns could result from various accidents or even self-harm? The specific patterns I documented, finger marks on the calves and arms, linear bruising consistent with a belt or cord, and injuries in various stages of healing, are highly characteristic of inflicted injuries rather than accidents, Harper replied firmly. And self-harm in a 7-year-old would be extremely unusual without other behavioral indicators, none of which Toby displayed. For 20 minutes, Blackwell continued his attempts to create doubt, suggesting alternative explanations for the injuries and questioning Harper's objectivity. She remained steady, neither defensive nor emotional, grounding her responses in medical evidence and professional experience. When she was finally excused from the stand, Harper felt drained but satisfied that she had spoken clearly for Toby. As she left the courtroom, she caught a glimpse of Vanessa Winters sitting beside her attorney, dressed in a modest blue blouse that contrasted sharply with her usual elegant attire. Their eyes met briefly, and Harper was struck by the emptiness she saw there. Not remorse or anger, but a profound absence, as though whatever capacity for empathy might have existed had long ago withered away. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps. Harper breathed deeply, letting the cool air clear her mind. Detective Reeves joined her a few minutes later. "You did well in there," he said. "Clear, professional, unshakable. What happens now?" "The judge will determine if there's enough evidence to proceed to trial. Given what we've presented, I'd say it's almost certain." Harper nodded, unsurprised. "And Toby?" "The hearing about permanent custody is scheduled for next week. If all goes as expected, he'll be returned to Daniel's care, with continued supervision and therapeutic support." Reeves studied her face. "I heard about Daniel's request for you to remain involved in Toby's life." "News travels fast," Harper remarked. "I'm still working through the ethical considerations with the hospital administration. We're developing a framework that would allow me to provide follow-up support without compromising professional boundaries." Reeves nodded approvingly. "Good. That boy needs consistency. People who've proven they'll stand up for him." He checked his watch. "I need to get back inside for the final testimonies. Will you be staying?" Harper shook her head. "I've said what I needed to say. Now it's up to the judge." As Reeves headed back into the courthouse, Harper walked toward the parking lot, her thoughts turning to the next day's appointments. Life continued, with other children needing her attention and care. But Toby had carved a special place in her consciousness, a reminder of why vigilance mattered, why looking beneath the surface was not just a professional obligation but a moral imperative. In her car, Harper found a text message from Daniel. "Toby asked if you might come to his art therapy exhibition next week. Small event at the center. Only if appropriate within your professional boundaries." The message made her smile. Boundaries would need to be maintained, yes, but they could be thoughtfully negotiated. She texted back, "I'll check with the ethics committee, but tentatively yes. Thank you for thinking of me." As Harper drove home through the gathering dusk, she reflected on the journey that had begun with a single observation: unusual bruising on a quiet boy's legs. From that moment, lives had changed, systems had been activated, and one child's silent suffering had finally found voice. There would be more difficult days ahead for Toby: therapy sessions to process his trauma, adjustments to his new reality with a father working to earn back his trust, and eventually, perhaps, a court trial where he might need to face his abuser. But he would not face those challenges alone or in silence. Sometimes, Harper thought, the most important thing we can do for another person is simply to see them, truly see them, beneath the surface of what they present to the world. For Toby Winters, that moment of being truly seen had changed everything. And for Harper Fletcher, it had reaffirmed the purpose that guided her life's work: to be the eyes that notice, the voice that speaks, when children cannot speak for themselves. The grand jury's decision came down on a Monday morning in early December, as Millbrook disappeared beneath the season's first substantial snowfall. The courthouse steps vanished under 3 inches of powder, and traffic slowed to a cautious crawl along Main Street. Harper heard the news from Dr. Cooper, who stopped by her office with 2 cups of steaming coffee. "Indictment on all counts," he announced, placing 1 cup on her desk. "Aggravated child abuse, assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, and attempted murder for the staircase incident." Harper wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting the news settle. "So there will be a trial, unless she accepts a plea deal, which the prosecutor doubts she will." Dr. Cooper took the chair across from Harper's desk, brushing snow from the shoulders of his white coat. "Vanessa has been maintaining her innocence, claiming Toby's injuries were either accidental or self-inflicted. That defense won't stand up against the medical evidence," Harper said. "No, it won't." Dr. Cooper studied her face. "How are you doing with all this? You've been more involved than usual." The question was asked with the gentle directness that characterized their 15-year friendship. Harper considered her answer carefully. "I'm managing the boundaries," she replied. "The ethics committee approved a limited supportive role outside direct medical care, given the circumstances. I attended Toby's art therapy exhibition last week. The therapist thought seeing supportive adults in the audience would reinforce his progress." Dr. Cooper nodded. "And how is he doing?" "Better than expected in some ways. The nightmares are decreasing, according to his therapist. He's opening up more in his sessions." Harper smiled slightly. "And his art is remarkable, raw and honest in a way that's helping him process what happened. Children are incredibly resilient when given the right support." Dr. Cooper took a sip of his coffee. "And Daniel? Is he stepping up?" "Completely transformed," Harper confirmed. "He's sold the company's international division to focus locally, rearranged his schedule around Toby's needs, and hasn't missed a single therapy session or school event. The court granted him full custody last week, with continued CPS supervision for 6 months." "Well, that's something good coming from all this." Dr. Cooper's expression turned more serious. "The reason I stopped by, beyond sharing the indictment news, is that the prosecutor called this morning. They may need Toby to testify at the trial." Harper's stomach tightened. "I thought they were trying to avoid that." "They were. But Vanessa's defense strategy hinges on portraying Toby as troubled and accident-prone. The prosecutor feels the jury needs to see him directly, to hear his account." Dr. Cooper leaned forward slightly. "They're asking if you would be willing to help prepare him, as someone he trusts with medical procedures. The questioning will be traumatic for him. They want to minimize the stress where possible." Harper set down her coffee, conflicting responsibilities warring within her. "I'd need to be very careful about my role. I can't be perceived as coaching a witness." "Of course." The prosecutor was thinking more along the lines of explaining the process in child-appropriate terms, being a familiar presence during preparation. "You wouldn't discuss case details or testimony content." Harper nodded slowly. "I'd want to consult with the hospital's legal team first. But yes, I'll help however I appropriately can." The conversation shifted to other patients and hospital matters, but Harper's thoughts remained with Toby and the ordeal that still lay ahead of him. The medical symptoms of his abuse were healing well. His broken arm now in a smaller cast, the bruises long faded, but the psychological aftermath would take much longer to resolve. And now, the judicial process threatened to re-traumatize him just as he was beginning to find his footing. After Dr. Cooper left, Harper pulled up her calendar and mentally rearranged her schedule to accommodate the prosecutor's request. As she did, a notification appeared on her computer, a reminder of Toby's scheduled checkup the following day. These appointments had continued even after his return to Daniel's custody, a way to monitor his physical recovery and provide continuity of care. Harper noted that tomorrow would mark exactly 3 months since that first appointment when she had noticed the unusual bruises on his legs. In some ways, it felt like years had passed. In others, like the memory was still fresh enough to touch. The following afternoon, Harper prepared the examination room with her usual care, adding a few extra touches. A new dinosaur sticker for Toby's collection and a medical play kit that often helped children process their experiences in a clinical setting. She had just finished arranging these items when a light knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she called, turning with a welcoming smile. Toby entered first, his face brighter than she had seen it in months. The permanent wariness that had shadowed his features had softened, though not disappeared entirely. He wore a blue puffer jacket dusted with melting snowflakes, and his arm cast was now decorated with colorful drawings. "Nurse Harper," he greeted her with unexpected enthusiasm. "Look what Dad got me." He proudly displayed a small pin attached to his backpack, a silver star, similar to the sticker he had chosen during that first fateful appointment. "That's beautiful, Toby," Harper said, crouching to admire it. "It looks just like the sticker you chose before. Dad said I could have a real one because I've been brave." His voice carried a note of pride that warmed Harper's heart. Daniel entered behind him, shaking snow from his boots. The transformation in him was as remarkable as his son's. Gone were the designer suits and harried expression of a man whose mind was elsewhere. Today he wore casual clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt, and his attention was focused entirely on Toby. "He hasn't stopped talking about that star since we got it yesterday," Daniel said with a gentle smile. "Though I think the hot chocolate afterward might have been an equal attraction." "Hot chocolate is very important medicine," Harper agreed seriously, winking at Toby. "Perfect for snowy days." The examination proceeded smoothly. Toby's physical recovery was progressing well, his arm healing properly, his weight returning to a healthier range now that meals were no longer withheld as punishment. Harper noted each improvement in his chart, creating the documentation that would continue to support his ongoing care and, if necessary, serve as evidence in the upcoming trial. "Your arm is looking great," she told Toby as she examined the setting of the fracture. "The doctor might even be able to remove the cast earlier than expected." "Really?" Toby's eyes widened with excitement. "Before Christmas?" "I think that's a very good possibility," Harper confirmed. "Just in time to try out any new toys Santa might bring." As Harper continued the examination, she noticed a subtle change in Toby's demeanor. A new openness, a willingness to speak without first glancing at an adult for permission. He answered her questions directly, even volunteering additional information about his activities and feelings. When the physical examination was complete, Harper offered him the medical play kit. "Would you like to try being the doctor today? You can check your dad's heartbeat while I update your chart." Toby nodded eagerly, taking the toy stethoscope and approaching Daniel with comic seriousness. "I need to listen to your heart, Dad. Please sit very still." Daniel complied with exaggerated obedience, making Toby giggle as he placed the plastic stethoscope against his father's chest. While Toby was absorbed in his play, Harper spoke quietly to Daniel. "He's doing remarkably well, both physically and emotionally." Daniel nodded, keeping most of his attention on Toby's serious doctor impersonation. "His therapist says the same thing. There are still difficult moments, nightmares, occasional regressive behaviors, but he's progressing faster than they expected. Children often surprise us with their resilience," Harper said, "especially when they have consistent support." "Which is why I wanted to thank you," Daniel said, his voice low enough that Toby, now examining his father's reflexes, couldn't hear. "For seeing what I missed. For speaking up when it would have been easier to look away." The simple acknowledgement caught Harper off guard. "I was just doing my job," she said. "No," Daniel shook his head slightly. "You went beyond that. You saw my son when I didn't. That's a debt I can never repay." Before Harper could respond, Toby interrupted with his diagnosis. "Dad, your heart is beating really good, but your knee is a little slow. You might need medicine." Daniel accepted this assessment with grave seriousness. "What kind of medicine would you recommend, Dr. Toby?" "Ice cream," Toby declared confidently. "A very big bowl." The three of them laughed, the sound filling the small examination room with unexpected lightness. In that moment, Harper saw a glimpse of what Toby might have been without the shadow of abuse. Carefree, playful, secure in the knowledge that he was safe and loved. When the appointment concluded, Daniel helped Toby back into his snow jacket while Harper prepared his discharge paperwork. "Oh, I meant to ask," Daniel said casually. Has the prosecutor spoken with you about the trial preparations? Harper nodded. Dr. Cooper mentioned it yesterday. I've agreed to help explain the process to Toby, if the hospital's legal team approves. Relief washed over Daniel's face. Thank you. The thought of him facing Vanessa in court. He trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. The prosecutor will request protective measures, Harper assured him. Toby may be able to testify via closed-circuit television, or have the courtroom cleared except for essential personnel. I hope so, Daniel said. He's making such progress. I don't want this to set him back. The most important thing is for him to know he's supported, Harper said, watching as Toby carefully zipped his jacket. That regardless of what happens in court, he's safe now. Daniel nodded, his expression resolute. He'll know that, I promise. As they prepared to leave, Toby paused at the door, turning back to Harper with unexpected seriousness. Nurse Harper, can I tell you something? Of course, Toby, she replied, crouching to his eye level. I'm not scared anymore, he said simply. Not at nighttime or when Dad goes to a meeting, because I know you and Detective Reeves and Dr. Cooper won't let her come back. The simple statement, delivered with a child's direct certainty, resonated more deeply than any thank you Daniel could have offered. Harper smiled, careful to keep her professional composure despite the emotion tightening her throat. That's right, Toby. We won't. And neither will your dad. Toby nodded, satisfied with this confirmation of what he already knew. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I made this for you. It's us. Harper carefully unfolded the drawing. Unlike his earlier artwork with its dark clouds and isolated figures, this one showed two people, a small boy and a woman in what was clearly a nurse's uniform, standing beneath a bright yellow sun. Both figures were smiling. It's beautiful, Toby, Harper said softly. Thank you. Dad's going to frame one like it for our house, Toby informed her. But this one is for your office, so you can remember. I'll put it right on my wall, Harper promised. I'll see it every day. With a satisfied nod, Toby took his father's hand, and they left the examination room. Harper watched them go, the drawing still in her hands. A simple but powerful testament to one child's journey from fear to safety, from silence to self-expression. She carefully placed the artwork in a folder to take to her office, her resolve strengthening for the challenges that still lay ahead. Whatever the trial brought, whatever obstacles emerged, she would continue to stand firm for Toby and all the children like him, the ones whose wounds lay beneath the surface, waiting for someone to truly see. January arrived with brutal cold and shortened days, the sun setting by mid-afternoon and temperatures rarely climbing above freezing. The winter's trial was scheduled to begin on January 15th, and preparation intensified as the date approached. Harper met with the prosecutor, Diane Wright, and Toby's therapist, Dr. Benson, to coordinate their approach to preparing him for testimony. The meeting took place in Wright's office, a pragmatic space lined with law books and case files. The judge has granted our request for modified testimony procedures, Wright explained, her reading glasses perched on top of her cropped gray hair. Toby will testify via closed-circuit television from a separate room, with only essential personnel present, the attorneys, the judge, and one support person of his choosing. That's excellent news, Dr. Benson said. She was a soft-spoken woman in her 50s who specialized in trauma therapy for children. The direct confrontation with his abuser would likely be severely re-traumatizing. What about cross-examination? Harper asked, concerned about Blackwell's aggressive courtroom tactics. Still required, Wright admitted. But the judge has imposed strict limitations. Questions must be age-appropriate, non-intimidating, and directly relevant to the charges. I'll object immediately if Blackwell crosses those lines. They discussed the timeline for preparation, 2 sessions with Toby to explain the process in child-friendly terms, followed by a visit to the courthouse to familiarize him with the environment. Harper's role would be to attend these sessions as a trusted medical professional, helping to explain what would happen in terms Toby could understand and offering continuity between his medical care and the legal proceedings. The defense is still pushing the narrative that Toby's injuries were self-inflicted or accidental. Wright warned. They've hired an expert to testify that children who've lost a parent sometimes harm themselves for attention. It's thin, but Blackwell will milk it for all it's worth. That's absurd, Harper said, her professional calm momentarily slipping. The medical evidence clearly contradicts that theory. I know, Wright agreed, and we have solid experts to counter it. But I want you all prepared for what Toby might hear or face. As the meeting concluded, Harper gathered her notes, her mind already organizing how she would approach her role in Toby's preparation. Dr. Benson walked out with her, their footsteps echoing in the courthouse hallway. He's stronger than they realize, Dr. Benson remarked. Beneath that quiet exterior is a remarkably resilient child. I've seen that, Harper agreed. Still, facing this trial, even with modifications, will be difficult, Dr. Benson nodded, but also potentially empowering. For children who've experienced abuse, testifying can be part of reclaiming their voice, if handled properly. Harper considered this perspective as she drove back to the hospital through the early winter darkness. The thermometer on her dashboard showed 17 degrees, and the streets were eerily empty as residents of Millbrook huddled indoors against the cold. She thought about Toby, safe in his home with Daniel, no longer frightened of the night or of being left alone. The progress he had made in 3 months was remarkable, a testament to both his resilience and the support system that had formed around him. The following week, Harper attended the first preparation session at Dr. Benson's office, a warm space decorated with children's artwork and comfortable furniture scaled for small bodies. Toby sat cross-legged on a beanbag chair, surprisingly calm as Diane Wright explained the trial process using simple, concrete terms. It's like telling a story, but it's a true story, your story, Wright explained. The judge is like a referee who makes sure everyone follows the rules. My job is to help you tell your story. Mr. Blackwell's job is to ask questions about the story. Will she be there? Toby asked, the only sign of his anxiety a slight fidgeting with the edge of his cast. She'll be in the main courtroom, Wright explained, but you'll be in a special room with a camera. You'll be able to see the judge and the lawyers on a TV screen, but they'll see you on their screen. You won't have to be in the same room as Vanessa. Toby absorbed this information with a thoughtful nod. Like when Dad has video meetings for work? Very similar, Wright confirmed, pleased with his understanding. And you can have one person in the room with you for support. Who would you like that to be? Toby considered the question seriously. Dad, he said after a moment. But if Dad can't, then Nurse Harper. Harper felt touched by his trust, even as she maintained her professional demeanor. I'm honored, Toby, but I think your dad will definitely want to be there with you. The session continued, with Wright gently explaining what kinds of questions might be asked and how Toby should answer, truthfully in his own words and only what he remembered. Dr. Benson interjected occasionally with reassurances and grounding techniques Toby could use if he became anxious during testimony. Throughout the session, Harper observed Toby carefully, noting his responses and body language. He was engaged, attentive, and remarkably composed for a 7-year-old discussing such difficult matters. The only moment he showed significant distress was when Wright mentioned that Vanessa's attorney might suggest he was making up stories or hurting himself. But that's not true, Toby said, his voice rising slightly. I never did that. She did it. We know, Toby, Dr. Benson said gently. And it's okay to say that's not true if someone suggests something that isn't right. You just tell what really happened. By the end of the session, Toby seemed tired but not overwhelmed. As Daniel arrived to pick him up, Harper pulled him aside briefly. He did really well, she assured him. Very engaged and responsive. Daniel's relief was palpable. He was anxious this morning, but he insisted he wanted to do this. Said it was important to tell the truth out loud. Harper nodded, recognizing Toby's words as an echo of their conversations during his medical checkups. He's internalized the message that speaking up is both safe and necessary. That's significant progress. I give most of the credit to his therapy, Daniel said, watching as Toby gathered his coat. And to you. The consistency of having trusted adults who believe him has made all the difference. As they prepared to leave, Toby approached Harper with a tentative question. Are you coming to the big court day? I'll be there, Harper confirmed. I'll be testifying too, though at a different time than you. This seemed to reassure him. With a quick wave, he took his father's hand and headed out into the winter afternoon, his small figure bundled against the cold. Harper remained behind briefly to discuss the session with Wright and Dr. Benson. They agreed that Toby was handling the preparation well, but would need continued support as the trial date approached. The next step would be a visit to the courthouse to see the rooms where he would testify and become familiar with the equipment. As Harper drove home that evening, her thoughts kept returning to Toby's quiet determination. Children who experienced abuse often internalized shame and self-doubt, questioning their own perceptions and right to speak. Yet somehow, despite months of systematic emotional manipulation by Vanessa, Toby had maintained an inner compass that recognized truth from falsehood. With support, that compass was now guiding him toward healing. The realization brought both professional satisfaction and a deeper, more personal sense of purpose. This case had reminded Harper why she had chosen pediatric nursing, not just to treat physical ailments, but to be part of the safety net that caught children before they fell through society's cracks. The courthouse visit took place the following week, on a Tuesday afternoon when the building was relatively quiet. Harper met Daniel and Toby at the main entrance, where Detective Reeves waited to escort them inside. The detective had become another constant in Toby's support system, his gruff exterior softening noticeably when dealing with the boy. Ready for the grand tour? Reeves asked, crouching slightly to address Toby directly. Toby nodded, his eyes wide as he took in the imposing marble columns and high ceilings of the courthouse lobby. His hand remained firmly in Daniel's, but his curiosity seemed to outweigh his apprehension. They began in the main courtroom, empty now except for a clerk organizing papers at a side table. Reeves explained each area, where the judge would sit, where the attorneys would stand, where witnesses would testify. Toby listened attentively, asking occasional questions that revealed his effort to understand this adult world of justice. Where will she sit? He asked, his voice dropping slightly on the pronoun that had become his way of referring to Vanessa without using her name. Right there, Reeves said, pointing to the defense table. But remember, you won't be in this room when you tell your story. You'll be in a special room that we're going to see next. The witness room was smaller and less intimidating, furnished with a comfortable chair facing a camera and monitor. A court technician demonstrated how the system worked, showing Toby how he would be able to see the judge and attorneys on the screen while they saw him. You can sit right here, the technician explained, patting the chair. Would you like to try it out? Toby hesitated, then nodded. He climbed into the chair, which was slightly too large for him, and watched with interest as his own image appeared on the monitor. Now I'm going to switch the feed so you can see the courtroom, the technician continued, pressing several buttons. The screen changed to show the empty courtroom they had just visited. See? You can see them, but you're safe in here. This demonstration seemed to reassure Toby considerably. His shoulders relaxed, and he even smiled slightly as he waved at his own image now visible on a small screen in the courtroom. Dad will be sitting right here beside you, Harper added, indicating a chair just off camera. He'll be with you the whole time. The remainder of the visit included a tour of the courthouse facilities, including the cafeteria where Diane Wright promised Toby could have hot chocolate during breaks. By the time they concluded, much of Toby's initial tension had dissipated, replaced by the matter-of-fact acceptance children often show once the unknown has been made familiar. As they prepared to leave, Reeves pulled Harper and Daniel aside while Toby examined a historical display in the lobby. There's been a development, the detective said, keeping his voice low. Vanessa's attorney has approached the prosecution about a possible plea deal. Daniel's expression tightened. What kind of deal? She would plead guilty to child endangerment and aggravated assault, in exchange for dropping the attempted murder charge. It would mean a sentence of 10 to 15 years, with possibility of parole after 8, instead of the potential 25 to life she's facing at trial. And Toby wouldn't have to testify, Harper realized, immediately seeing the benefit. That's right, Reeves confirmed. The prosecutor wanted me to mention it to you, Daniel. She needs to know your feelings on this before responding to Blackwell. Daniel looked across the lobby at his son, his expression troubled. What would be best for Toby? That's all I care about. Avoiding testimony would eliminate that stress, Harper said carefully. But it's also true that some children find empowerment in telling their story directly. The prosecutor is inclined to take the deal, Reeves added. It guarantees a conviction and significant prison time without putting Toby through the ordeal of testimony and cross-examination. But she wants your input. Daniel nodded slowly. I'll need to discuss this with Toby's therapist. And with Toby in an age-appropriate way. He deserves to have a voice in this decision. Of course, Reeves agreed. The offer is open until Friday. Take the time you need. As they left the courthouse, stepping into the bitter cold of the January afternoon, Harper observed Toby walking slightly ahead with Reeves, asking questions about the detective's badge. Despite everything he had endured, he maintained a child's natural curiosity and capacity for trust. Not indiscriminate trust, but a hard-won ability to recognize who was safe and who wasn't. What are you thinking? Daniel asked quietly, falling into step beside her. That whatever you decide about the plea deal, Toby is going to be okay, Harper answered honestly. He's already demonstrating remarkable healing. Daniel nodded, watching his son. Sometimes I look at him and see glimpses of the boy he was before all this, before his mother died, before Vanessa, before I failed him. Other times I see someone new emerging, stronger in some ways, but with scars that shouldn't be there. Both versions are part of who he is now, Harper said gently. Children integrate trauma into their understanding of the world. With the right support, it becomes part of their story without defining them. I hope you're right, Daniel said, because more than anything, I want him to have the chance to just be a child again. As if hearing his father's words, Toby turned at that moment, his face brightening with a spontaneous smile as he pointed to a street performer juggling on the corner. The simple delight in his expression, unguarded, genuine, was perhaps the most healing sign of all. The decision came 2 days later. Daniel called Harper from his car, his voice carrying the weight of careful consideration. We're taking the plea deal, he said. After talking with Dr. Benson and considering what's best for Toby, we've decided to accept the prosecutor's recommendation. How does Toby feel about it? Harper asked, stepping away from the nurse's station for privacy. He understood more than I expected, Daniel admitted. When I explained that Vanessa would still go to prison but he wouldn't have to talk in court, he seemed relieved. He said, Daniel's voice caught slightly. He said he's already told his story to the people who needed to hear it. Harper smiled at the wisdom in Toby's response. That sounds like him. He's very perceptive. The formal hearing is scheduled for Monday, Daniel continued. Just the attorneys, the judge, and Vanessa. Toby and I don't need to be there. That's good, Harper said. A clean break in a way. That's what we're hoping for. A chance to focus on moving forward instead of reliving the past. After ending the call, Harper updated her calendar, canceling the block time she had reserved for the trial. The unexpected resolution brought a sense of relief, not just for Toby, but for everyone involved in his case. A trial would have meant weeks of testimony, media coverage, and the inevitable strain of having private suffering exposed to public scrutiny. The plea hearing proceeded as scheduled, with minimal media attention. Vanessa Winters accepted the terms, pleading guilty to child endangerment and aggravated assault. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in state prison, with eligibility for parole after 8 years. Additionally, she would be permanently registered as a child abuser, preventing her from working with children in any capacity upon release. Life in Millbrook gradually returned to its normal rhythms. The story that had briefly consumed local attention faded from headlines, replaced by municipal budget discussions and preparations for the annual Winter Festival. For Harper, too, routine resumed, regular patients, standard procedures, the familiar cycle of hospital shifts. Yet something had changed, not just for Toby and Daniel, but for Harper herself. The case had reinforced her commitment to looking beneath the surface, to trusting her instincts even when doing so meant disrupting comfortable assumptions. It had also connected her to a network of allies, Dr. Cooper, Detective Reeves, Diane Wright, Dr. Benson, all dedicated to protecting children in their different professional capacities. Toby's weekly checkups eventually transitioned to monthly appointments, then to regular annual physicals as his healing progressed. Daniel followed through on his commitment to be more present, adjusting his business to allow for family dinners, school events, and the ordinary moments that built trust between father and son. 6 months after the plea hearing, Harper received an invitation from Daniel, a community picnic to celebrate the end of the school year, with proceeds benefiting the Children's Advocacy Center that had supported Toby's recovery. The note included a personal message. Toby specifically asked if you could come. No professional obligations, just as a friend who made a difference. Harper consulted once more with the Hospital Ethics Committee, which approved her attendance as appropriate given the community nature of the event and the closure of Toby's active case. On a warm June afternoon, she found herself walking through Millbrook Park, where colorful banners announced the celebration and families gathered on blankets spread across the green lawn. She spotted Toby near the playground, his cast long gone, engaged in an enthusiastic game of tag with several classmates. His laughter carried across the park, uninhibited, genuine, the sound of a child reclaiming joy. Daniel approached, carrying 2 plastic cups of lemonade. "He saw you arrive," he said, offering Harper one of the cups. "Said he'll come say hello after this game. Apparently, he's it and takes the responsibility very seriously." Harper accepted the lemonade with a smile. "That's quite the gathering you've organized," she observed, noting the impressive turnout. "The community has been supportive," Daniel acknowledged, "and it felt important to channel everything that happened into something positive." He paused, watching his son. Toby starts 3rd grade in September. New teacher, new classroom. Dr. Benson thinks the fresh start will be good for him. "And how are you doing?" Harper asked, observing the changes in Daniel as well, the more relaxed posture, the absence of the harried expression he had worn when they first met. "Learning every day," he admitted. "About being present, about listening, about what it really means to protect someone you love." He met her gaze directly. "I'll never forget that I failed him once, but I can make sure I never fail him again." Their conversation was interrupted as Toby ran toward them, slightly breathless from his game. "Nurse Harper, you came." His face was flushed with exercise and excitement, so different from the pale, withdrawn child who had entered her examination room 9 months earlier. "I wouldn't have missed it," Harper told him. "That looks like a pretty serious game of tag." "I tagged everyone," Toby announced proudly. "Even Michael, and he's the fastest runner in our class." "Impressive skills," Harper acknowledged solemnly. Toby beamed at the praise, then grew slightly more serious. "I made something for the auction table. Dad helped me build it. Do you want to see?" "I'd love to," Harper said, allowing him to lead her toward a display of items being auctioned to support the advocacy center. The object Toby proudly pointed out was a simple but beautiful birdhouse, painted blue with careful detailing around the entrance hole. A small plaque attached to the base read, "Home should be safe. Built by Toby Winters, age 8. It's for birds who need a home," Toby explained earnestly. "Dad says birds need safe places too." "It's wonderful, Toby," Harper said, genuinely impressed by both the craftsmanship and the sentiment behind it. "I think I might have to bid on this." His face lit up. "Really?" "Absolutely. My garden could use more birds." Satisfied with this response, Toby's attention was quickly reclaimed by his friends calling him back to their game. "I have to go," he said, "but I'll come back later. Okay?" "I'll be here," Harper promised, watching as he ran back to the playground, unencumbered by fear or silence. Daniel had followed them to the auction table. That birdhouse was his idea from start to finish, he said quietly. From design to purpose. It's perfect, Harper replied, already writing her bid on the sheet beside the birdhouse. She made sure the amount was generous enough to support the cause but not so high as to discourage other bidders. This was, after all, a community effort. As the afternoon continued, Harper found herself welcomed into conversations with parents, teachers, and other community members, many of whom knew of her role in Toby's case. There were no dramatic thank yous or public acknowledgments, just the quiet recognition that sometimes protection comes from those who are paying attention at crucial moments. Later, as the sun began to set and families gathered for the picnic dinner, Harper found a quiet spot at the edge of the activity. She watched as Toby sat with his father and several friends, engaged in animated conversation over hot dogs and potato salad. The scene was so ordinary, so beautifully normal, that it brought unexpected emotion to her throat. Dr. Cooper appeared beside her, paper plate in hand. I see you got roped into this too, he observed with a smile. Wouldn't have missed it, Harper replied. And you? Daniel invited the whole team. Me, Reeves, Dr. Benson. I think it's his way of marking how far they've come. Dr. Cooper nodded toward Toby. He's doing well. Better than well, Harper agreed. He's thriving. They stood in companionable silence, two medical professionals who had seen too many children failed by the systems and people meant to protect them. This time, though, intervention had worked. The safety net had held. You know, Dr. Cooper said thoughtfully, cases like this remind me why we do what we do. Not just the medicine, but the seeing. The willingness to look beneath the surface. Harper nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person who's willing to see. As twilight deepened over Millbrook Park, the community gathered for the lighting of paper lanterns, a tradition meant to symbolize hope and new beginnings. Harper watched as Daniel helped Toby light his lantern, their faces illuminated by the warm glow. The boy's expression was peaceful, focused on the present moment rather than shadowed by the past. When Toby released his lantern, it joined dozens of others rising into the darkening sky, small points of light against the encroaching night. Harper thought about the journey that had brought them all to this moment. How a single observation during a routine appointment had set in motion a chain of events that ultimately saved a child's life. Not just his physical life, but his chance at emotional wholeness, at trust, at joy. As if sensing her thoughts, Toby turned and waved to her, his face illuminated by the glow of ascending lanterns. Harper waved back, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for her role in pediatric medicine. Every child deserved what Toby now had: safety, support, and the freedom to simply be a child. Detective Reeves appeared beside her, hands in his pockets as he watched the lanterns rise. Not bad for a Tuesday evening, he remarked. Harper smiled. Not bad at all. You know, Reeves said contemplatively, in 20 years on the force, I've seen too many cases where we were too late, where no one saw the signs until it was over. He nodded toward Toby. It's good to be reminded that sometimes we get it right. Sometimes we do, Harper agreed softly. As the evening wound down, families began collecting blankets and picnic baskets, children protesting bedtime despite obvious fatigue. Harper prepared to leave as well, but not before checking the auction results. To her delight, she had won the birdhouse, outbid at the last minute by Daniel himself, who had immediately conceded to her. He'll be thrilled to know it's going home with you, Daniel said, handing her the blue birdhouse. Thank you for coming today, Harper. It meant a lot to him, to both of us. It meant a lot to me too, she replied honestly. As she carried the birdhouse to her car, Harper felt a sense of completion that went beyond professional satisfaction. The cycle of secrecy and harm that had entrapped Toby had been broken. In its place, a new cycle had formed, one of healing, support, and cautious optimism. She thought of the drawing Toby had given her months earlier, now framed on her office wall, the nurse and the boy standing beneath a bright sun. It was a child's simple representation of a complex truth, that sometimes hope begins with being seen, truly seen, by someone who refuses to look away. Harper placed the birdhouse carefully on her passenger seat and drove home through the quiet streets of Millbrook. Tomorrow would bring new patients, new challenges, perhaps even new cases that would require her to look beneath the surface of what was presented. But tonight, she carried with her the image of paper lanterns rising into the darkness. Small lights against the vastness of night, each one a testament to the possibility of change, of healing, of hope. And sometimes, she reflected as she pulled into her driveway, that was enough. To know that one child who had been lost in silence now had a voice, that one child who had lived in fear now knew safety. Sometimes that was everything. 1 year later, Harper sat on a bench in Millbrook Park, enjoying the warmth of late spring sunshine. The community had gathered again for what had become an annual event, the Children's Advocacy Picnic, now expanded with more activities and greater participation from local businesses and organizations. The blue birdhouse she had won at the previous year's auction now had pride of place in her garden, home to a family of chickadees that Toby delighted in watching whenever he visited with his father. Those visits had evolved naturally as Daniel sought advice about Toby's ongoing recovery and eventually about normal childhood developmental questions. Harper spotted Toby across the park, playing soccer with a group of children his age. At 9, he had grown taller, his frame filling out as proper nutrition and regular activity erased the physical vestiges of his earlier neglect. More striking than his physical transformation was his demeanor. Confident, engaged, laughing openly as he raced after the ball. Dr. Cooper joined her on the bench, 2 ice cream cones in hand. "Thought you might need refreshment," he said, offering her one. "It's getting warm out here." "Thanks." Harper accepted the cone gratefully. "Have you seen the turnout this year? Nearly twice as many people." "Daniel has become quite the advocate," Dr. Cooper observed. "The foundation he started has already funded training for 50 teachers on recognizing signs of abuse." Harper nodded, watching as Daniel organized a group of volunteers setting up tables for the afternoon activities. After the case had concluded, he had channeled his guilt and regret into positive action, establishing the Toby Winters Foundation to support child protection initiatives across the state. "How's your new rotation going?" Dr. Cooper asked, referring to Harper's recent decision to split her time between regular pediatric nursing and a specialized role with the hospital's child protection team. "Challenging," Harper admitted, "but fulfilling. We're implementing that new screening protocol next month. More comprehensive questions, better training for staff on recognizing concerning patterns." "The Harper Protocol," Dr. Cooper said with a smile. "Though I still think you should have let them name it after you officially." Harper shook her head, embarrassed by the suggestion. "It's not about recognition. It's about making sure we don't miss the signs." Their conversation was interrupted as Toby ran toward them, slightly out of breath from his soccer game. "Nurse Harper." Dr. Cooper. "Did you see my goal?" "Absolutely spectacular," Dr. Cooper confirmed solemnly, though Harper knew he had seen no such thing. "Professional quality." Toby beamed at the praise. "Dad says I can join the travel team next fall if my grades stay good." He turned to Harper. "And guess what? I got picked to be a peer mentor for the new kids at school. I help them find their way around and stuff." "That's wonderful, Toby," Harper said, genuinely impressed. "You'll be excellent at that." "Yeah, I told them I want to help the quiet kids especially," he explained with the directness of childhood. "Sometimes they have important stuff to say but don't know how." The simple statement, delivered without self-consciousness, caught Harper by surprise. In that moment, she glimpsed not just the child Toby was now, but the compassionate young man he was becoming. Someone whose own experience of suffering had created in him a capacity for empathy beyond his years. "That's very wise," she told him. Toby shrugged, already distracted by his friends calling him back to their game. "I gotta go. Dad says we're all having dinner at the big table later." "You're coming, right?" "Wouldn't miss it," Harper assured him. As Toby ran back to his friends, Dr. Cooper turned to Harper with raised eyebrows. "Quite a transformation." "Yes," Harper agreed softly. "But the seeds were always there. His resilience, his compassion. They just needed the right conditions to grow." They sat in companionable silence, watching the community celebration unfold around them. What had begun as a response to tragedy had evolved into something affirmative, a commitment to protecting all children, to creating systems where those who were vulnerable would be seen and heard. Later, as twilight approached and families gathered for the lantern lighting, Harper found herself standing beside Detective Reeves, who had recently been promoted to head of the Special Victims Unit. "Got an interesting call yesterday," Reeves mentioned casually as they watched Daniel helping Toby prepare his lantern. "From a pediatric nurse over in Brunswick. Had concerns about a patient, remembered our case from last year. Wanted guidance on how to proceed." "And?" Harper prompted. "And we're looking into it," Reeves said simply. "The system working the way it should. Someone paying attention, reaching out, following through." Harper nodded, understanding the significance of what he was describing. Their case had created ripples. Increased awareness, improved communication between agencies, professionals more willing to trust their instincts and speak up when something didn't seem right. As the first lanterns began to rise into the darkening sky, Harper watched Toby with his father. Their heads bent together over the delicate paper structure, their expressions focused and peaceful. The boy who had once flinched at sudden movements now stood tall and secure, confident in his safety and his worth. Daniel caught her watching them and smiled in acknowledgement. A simple gesture that conveyed volumes about their shared journey from crisis to healing. There would always be a bond between them, forged in the crucible of Toby's rescue and recovery. Not a personal bond, but something equally powerful. A commitment to ensuring that what happened to Toby would not happen to other children if they could prevent it. When it was time to release the lanterns, Harper joined the circle that had formed in the center of the park. This year, she had brought her own lantern, carefully crafted that morning. As she prepared to release it into the night sky, she thought about all the children she had treated throughout her career, the ones whose needs had been met, the ones who had slipped through the cracks, and the ones like Toby who had found their way to safety because someone had looked beneath the surface. Her lantern joined the others, rising on the warm air currents, a small light against the vastness of the night. Beside her, Toby watched his own lantern ascend, his face upturned to follow its progress, no longer afraid of what the darkness might hold. "It's beautiful," he said simply. And in that moment, with paper lanterns illuminating the night sky and a community united in purpose, Harper had to agree. It was beautiful, not just the spectacle above them, but the healing that had made it possible, the broken cycle, the new beginning. For Toby, for herself, and for all the children who needed someone to truly see them, it was very beautiful indeed.